Hi guys, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. I know it's been a while. The Missy's Imagining household has kind of had a rough time of it lately. We had to say goodbye to our little furry child, and so he was 12 years old, and it was time. So it's been kind of a rough last few weeks as we kind of moved towards and through that process. So that being said, now we need some projects to kind of divert attention and use up some pent-up energy. So I have some things going. Before we start a look at our actual project today, just a quick reminder and shout out to, if you are wanting some really good dolly weighted fleece, and by that I mean, like, if I go to Joann and I get some of their really nice fleece, it is really nice. It's very expensive, and it's also very heavy. Some of it's not quite as heavy, but a lot of it is, because it's for people, blankets and hoodies and whatnot. So it's very thick. But if you want some pretty fleeces that are good for doll weighted items, so they're not quite as thick, but they still have that warm, fuzzy fleece texture. I noticed the other day Walmart again has their little blankets coming in because of the holidays. So this one was a tie-dye, which, I'm always a fan of tie-dye. You can't tell underneath by our project and my clothing. So this one is less pinks, but it's just more blues, greens, orange, more of the primary colors. This was like $3.50 or $3.90, something like that. But it's a huge size. Oh, I should get the measurements here. And I don't have glasses on. So it's quite a bit of fabric if you're not saying, okay, what's the value of a blanket, but you're just saying, what's the value of fabric? You're looking at 50 inches by 60 inches. So it's almost 2 yards of fabric at 50 inches wide for, between $3 and $4. In most instances, unless you have a double or triple coupon somewhere, you're not going to get fleece for that price if you're trying to buy yardage. And I apologize, my voice is kind of froggy. So that's like 2 yards full width fabric for not very much money, and you can make a lot of doll items, and this fabric is thin enough that it does work well for doll items because it's not going to add all that bulk that a normal fleece would add. So that is in fact what we're going to do in our project today. We're using some from a blanket I bought a long time ago that has tie-dye, of course, but it has more pink in it as well. But this piece I bought, and I've made, I think, 4 hoodie jackets. Now we're going to do the project today, and I still have tons of fabric left. So it's just a super economical way. If you want to get fleece to make doll clothing, just look at like Walmart. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, Bi-Mart, and I don't know what others. Sometimes some of the like sporting goods stores will have, the holiday bin that'll have a lot of little fleece blankets that might be in camo colors. There's just a lot of ways. Fred Meyer might have them. But it's just a really inexpensive way to get that fabric. So just a reminder, it's the time of the year. It's getting into the late fall, winter season. Holidays are coming, and these little blankets are going to be on sale. So keep your eyes peeled. Sometimes the prints, of course, are going to be too big, but a lot of times, like with this tie-dye or camouflage, or if it's just like a speckled wintry print, the prints are not going to be that outlandishly sized for your doll items. So keep an eye out there. The other thing I thought I would show is a couple of the finished shirts from the overall short sleeve shirt slash long sleeve shirt pattern I posted a while ago that actually has the banded collar. So we'll stand the collar up here. So I still have to do the handwork like the buttons and snaps. Excuse me. But inside there's the facing, and then what the lining looks like. And I do have several videos already on sewing shirts, so you can check those out as far as the how-to. But I just thought I would show what that pattern looks like. I did enlarge the shoulders somewhat, and then I think after I cut these out, I still enlarged it just one more time before I put on the revised pattern, because it still seemed a little narrow in the shoulders. But this is the short sleeve. Well, this would be like the mid-length sleeve, and I think the pattern also includes another sleeve that's even shorter. So you have a couple options there. And just with the difference in print, I just kind of wanted to show what a different look you can get depending on your fabric. So here we have the buffalo plaid, which I found at Walmart in their fat quarters. It's a really nice size plaid for an SD ball jointed doll or BJD. It could probably work for the MSD size as well, but it's just that smaller scaled print, so it looks really good on doll clothing. This one's just more of a busy, casual print, but the print is small enough that it looks good on the shirt. That again was a fat quarter. Here's another one in like red on red print that has more of a, I don't know, just kind of a more of a designer look to it, I guess, with that style of a print. So you can get a lot of different looks with the same pattern, just dependent on the fabric that you choose. And if you're doing doll clothing, get fat quarters. It's just a really economical way to get a variety of prints without paying out the money for yardage. And because of the way a fat quarter is cut, if say I have a bolt of fabric that's 45 inches wide and you want a quarter of a yard, you're going to get a strip of fabric that's 45 inches long and only 9 inches tall. So if you get a fat quarter, what you're doing is instead of getting that long strip that's really narrow, you're getting a wider piece, 18 inches of fabric, that's half of that 45 bolt. So it's like, imagine rolling the fabric off the bolt, and this is like to new sewers. Obviously, a lot of you seamstresses and seamsters, you're going to know this already, but if you're new to sewing, when you unroll fabric off a bolt, it's folded. And a fat quarter is, if you imagine, cutting on that fold seam and then measuring 18 inches of that. So the amount of square yardage is the same. It's a quarter of a yard, but rather than being the full length of that width of fabric, it's half, and then it's wider. So you get a better piece of fabric for the length, or lengthways pieces that might be too long to fit on 9 inches. Like if you're doing a pair of pants, you would need that extra length. So fat quarters are a really fun way to try out a variety of prints, and because most of them are going to be found in the quilting section, the prints are going to be small generally, because they're generally from quilting fabrics, which often have smaller prints, which are ideal if you're doing doll clothes. So just a couple reminders on fabrics, where you can get good deals on them. I know often during the holidays, Joann will have their fat quarters on sale for a very reasonable amount. Walmart has a really good price on their fat quarters, and they have a decent variety. The buffalo plaid I found at Walmart. So just check some of those options when you're wanting to buy fabric. So there we go. So this fleece, like I say, I've already made 4 jackets and our project today, and I still have a lot of fabric left. So grab those little blankets while they're on sale, and you'll have some really nice fleece for your doll projects. So this project is going to be the Footie pajama pattern that I recently posted for an SD female. Okay, so my filming's kind of in shifts today. When I drafted this pattern, I used the basic set for the Angel Studio Hua Rong. We'll put a picture right here. She is about 60 centimeters tall. That's a little bit, what's the word I want? It's not quite her actual height, because she has high heel feet. Does that make sense? So if she had flat feet, she wouldn't be that tall. She'd probably be more like 58 centimeters, somewhere around in there, 59, 58. But because she's on her tiptoes, she's right at 60, maybe 61. So normally she isn't quite that tall, but she has a very full figure, and so I thought if I design this pattern for her, then even if you have a doll that's a little bit thinner, it will still work. You just might want to measure like from the shoulder all the way down to the heel, under the heel, and then to the bottom of the foot to the toe, just to make sure it's long enough for your doll, because it is the Footie pajamas. So this pattern will consist of the sleeves, there we go, and then it has a front and a back piece. So the front will have a dart here at the bust, and it'll look like this. The back will have darts at the heel so that you can put the darts in, which makes it easier to be fitted to the bottom of the foot. And then this will involve either you can use, what I'm going to use is actual ribbed collar fabric that's made for the collar of a shirt. I have a lot of this fabric. I got it at an estate sale. A lady had some kind of a sewing store, and so I was able to get a bunch of this kind of fabric. But if you don't have that, there are pieces for the wrist cuffs and the collar that you would just take a knit fabric and fold it in half, then sew the end shut, flip it right side out, and then stretch the raw edge to match the length of the neckline and the edge of the sleeves, and that will give you your ribbed cuff like on a sweatshirt. But I'm going to use this because I have it, so I have some of that. The other thing that this pattern does need is a front zipper. So I don't know that I've ever put a zipper in. Well, I guess some of the hoodies have had a zipper, but this set of pajamas will have a front zipper that will go down the front so that you can open it up and get it on the doll. So we have a zipper. Then the pattern also includes some fun elements. I'm not going to do the hoodie here because I've done a couple hoodies on the channel already, but it does have a hoodie option. Now if you choose to put on the hood, you don't use the collar, obviously. And then there are also some fun pieces. There's little pieces for bunny ears or little bear ears or kitty cat ears. There's a little piece for a little bear tail. Then there's a mention if you want to do a headband set, for a headband with antennae for the ladybug or butterfly options. So there's pieces on the pattern that would include the wing that you could trace out, and like for the butterfly you could use a transparent acetate sheet and just trace whatever part of that you want, and then use like a Sharpie or some kind of a permanent marker or translucent paint to paint the wings. And just if you're using some kind of a paint, know that you're probably going to do a spray fixative of some sort to make sure it doesn't flake off. The ladybug shell I would recommend using felt to make the ladybug shell. But so those are just some fun fantasy costume options. I didn't put it on there, but I thought about it later after it was already posted. You could do like a rectangle, fold it in half, gather the folded edge and put in some elastic and make a little tutu to go around the waist. And then, of course, the bodice of the pajamas, gives you that full body bodysuit option. So I wanted it ready for Halloween, in case you were wanting to do costumes, but just with everything with Salem, I didn't get that far. We were otherwise engaged in things. So I was sorry that it was late getting the costume part out, but it could still be fun if you wanted to do elves for Christmas, or if you wanted to make little antlers out of brown pipe cleaner, make little reindeer. There's just a lot of things that you can use this pattern for in the realm of costuming. So just so that you know it's there, it's available. The other thing these pajamas are going to feature is the anti-skid gripper fabric for the bottom of the feet. This I bought at Joann. You can probably find it pretty much at any fabric store. I don't know that Walmart would have it. I know they have a fabric section, but pretty much any fabric store will have this, or you could probably get it online. But this has the little rubber beads that keep things from sliding, and it'll be for the bottom of the feet, which I just think it's fun to put these, on the bottom of Footie pajamas. So we do have this for the bottom of the feet that will be applying that as well. So that's the pieces we're going to use today. And like I say, I'm not going to do the hood, but we will go ahead and put the pajamas together, put the zipper in, and feature the anti-skid fabric on the bottom of the feet. So we'll switch up the camera and go ahead and get started on our project. Okay, when it comes to the prep work, the first couple things I'm going to do is to add the ribbing to the cuff of the sleeve. So I have the finished nice edge of the collar here, and I'm going to put the raw edge to the fabric, and then I will anchor it down with a 1/4 inch seam. So usually all the doll patterns will have a 1/4 inch seam, all my doll inch patterns. And so then I get it anchored, then I'm going to stretch it to where it meets the other edge of the fabric. And with that stretch, now I'm going to sew. Go get it started there. And I apologize for my machine. It desperately needs a service, and it's got a tired belt, I think. So now, when we turn this to the inside, this is what the cuff on the sleeve will look like. So there we go. So that's one sleeve. I'll do the same on the other. And then the other thing I'm going to do is on the front piece, I'm going to go ahead and put the darts in at the bust. And on the feet, I'm going to put the darts in at the heel, and then I'll come back to the camera. Okay, so while getting these prepared to put the footies on, I did put the little darts in at the heel. But one thing I want to mention on especially a fleece where both sides look the same, remember when you're going to be putting in some of your prep work, such as, the darts, you want to make sure that you don't put them on the same side of the fabric. So you want to have your pieces so that they are in the opposite direction, so that you know that this is the good side of both pieces, so that when you get the darts in, you have the right side of each piece the right way, and the wrong side is where your sewing is. I can trim these threads, because if not, if you don't take care to notice that, it's really easy to forget to flip one of your pieces and have them both this way and put you know, the darts on the same side, and then when you go to put them together, you realize you have some darts on the outside of your fabric. So just make sure when you're working with fabric that looks the same pretty much on both sides of the fabric to take a mental note to flip your pieces that are opposite of one another so that they mirror each other, and that way you'll know that all your sewing is on the wrong side and then your finished part is on the good side of the fabric. So I flip my pieces so they mirror each other, put in the darts. Now to use this grip non-stick fabric, what I'm going to do is, I know that I want it to be like this on the good side of the fabric, so I place it so that the edges meet on the toe, and then I find where that edge of the fabric would be, and then I'm going to discover, I'm grabbing a ruler real quick here, where my seam line would be. So my seam would be right here, so I know it's a 1/4 inch in from right here. So now I'm going to move this down to where my seam line is. So that means that I'm going to come in another 1/4 inch, which is almost at the darts, just a little bit above them. And with right sides together, I'm going to place the raw edge pretty much right where the darts are. Then, and I know it looks counterintuitive, but it's just right almost where those darts are. And I'm going to sew across, if I can get my foot to stay up so I can place it here. My poor machine has just been through the world. And so now I'm going to sew about a 1/4 inch from the edge of that grip fabric on the right side, like so. And I guess I could have done this before I put the darts in, but either way it'll work, I think. There we go. Now I'm going to fold it, there we go, and pull it so that it's even. So now this will be the bottom of my foot, and now I'm going to just sew lightly, or like baste around the edges with a larger stitch. On my machine I'm going from 2.2 to 3.5. That will always vary depending on what your machine is. So I'm going to pull this snug to so it meets up with the fabric on the inside. And now I'm going to put the rubber part down towards the feed dogs so that they'll help feed that through. And on my little darts for the feet, I'm going to make the darts go up towards the leg. But if I have the little rubber stopper part on the side by the foot, it kind of gets stuck and doesn't want to sew very well. And I'm just going to baste around the edge with about a 1/4 inch. Oh, and that one turned. Well, we'll just leave it there. Just about a 1/4 inch from the edge. And I'm going to go around, and that way, see, the feed dogs are going to help feed that through so that the little rubber sticky part, non-skid, doesn't stick to my foot. There we go. Come up. And I guess I'll just change it since that other one did it that way, and we'll just go ahead and do it down. And I'm going to, and I'm not doing a lot of sewing on the camera just because my belt is screaming at us. So that gives us the foot part that will have that non-stick once we put these together. So this is the inside of the foot, and then that's the bottom. So I'll do that on the other leg as well. Then once the other foot has that on the bottom, then with the right sides together, I am going to sew the center back and crotch seam. So from the crotch part and then up the center back. So I'll be doing that on the back pieces. So we'll get that part done. And then we'll move on to the zipper. So now here is the good side of the back. We have the back seam and the crotch seam all done. And then we have both of the little foot pads on the bottom of the feet that will go underneath the foot from the back. So that's this piece. Now we have the front pieces that will need a zipper. And I'm sure there are a lot more sophisticated ways to do zipper than my way, but here's what we're going to do. So we're going to put right sides of the fabric together, and here again, when I put in the darts, then I made sure to mirror my fabric so that the right side and the right side both have the finished dart, and then they will fit together correctly. And at the crotch seam, I'm going to go ahead and pin here, and then kind of around the curve, just above where it kind of straightens out. This is going to be the end of my zipper. So then the rest, I'll pin it as well with a couple pins. And oh, I know my hands are just right in the way there. So I'm going to do a couple pins very quickly. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew with a regular size stitch from the crotch seam up to this first pin. Then I'm going to back tack a couple times. Then I'm going to baste the remainder of the way, because what I want to do is I want to keep this lined up real straight for my zipper. So first we're going to start here, and I'll put it in the machine here and sink my needle. I'm going to take out that first pin, and we're going to back tack. And right now I'm just on my regular, I think it's 2.2 length stitch that I use in doll clothing. It's kind of the default in my machine. I'm going to come right up to where that first or second pin is. I'm going to remove the pin, and I'm going to back tack and go up and back tack again. There we go. Now I'm going to change my stitch length to like 4.5. I just want to baste these two pieces together, so it's going to be a lot longer stitches now. Take out that pin, and we're going to go all the way up to the top of the neckline. We're not going to back tack because this is just basting. There we go. So cut that thread and trim this one. All right, so, and I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but we'll make an attempt. So here, hopefully it will show that these are very, very tiny stitches. Then we have our back tack, and then these are longer stitches. So now we're going to grab our zipper, and I'm going to cut off a bit, well, yeah, just a little bit of the end. It's kind of a little bit ragged looking. There, trim that off. So now I'm going to open up the PJs here to the inside, and I'm going to open up this. We're going to open the zipper, and on your pajamas, if you're making this, go ahead and add another 1/4 inch to the seam allowance, because I always forget on my zippers that I need more seam allowance than a 1/4 inch, but we're going to try to make this work. So I'm going to lay the tooth edge of the side of the zipper so that the slider is underneath there like this. I just opened it up, and I'm going to take the metal piece for the zipper stop almost to the edge, but like a 1/4 inch shy, a little bit less than a 1/4 inch shy, because I need to have enough seam allowance for my collar, and I'm going to put that here and line it up with the fold like so. And then I'm going to use a zipper foot and I'm going to sew it down. I can get my zipper foot, which looks like this. And I want to sew from the top down, so my foot is going to go on this side of where the zipper teeth are. So we're going to line this up like this. And I'm going to go all the way up to the top of the fabric because I want to hold this in place with by sewing it. All right. Back tack. Okay. And here we go. We're going to sew, being careful not to hit that metal piece of the zipper, that's the zipper stop. And we're lining up the teeth with the seam. Just kind of sewing right along the edge there. And my goal in opening the zipper is that I can catch the seam allowance in my seam for my zipper, because I probably should have made it wider, a wider seam allowance. There we go. And we're going to go all the way down to where that back tacking is. And if you're more comfortable, you can always put a pin there so that you can see it from the top. There we go. So we're going to come down here. And I'm going to go just past where it's back tacked. So I'm going to go past my pin. So I'll need to move my pin out of the way now. And go down a little bit farther. Okay. So now here comes the fun part, if my foot will stay up. Now we're going to zip it up like so. And now I'm going to make sure that seam allowance is still open. And this is like the teeth are a plastic, so I don't have to worry about damaging my needle. You still have to be careful, but it's not like when you sew a zipper with a metal foot. In that case, I would always turn the wheel by hand. But because this is just a plastic foot zipper, I'm just going to go ahead and be careful as I machine sew that around. Now I'm going to turn it, and now I'm going to make sure that seam allowance is laying flat, and I'm going to come back up this side, staying close to those zipper feet. And the reason I like to baste that seam is because this helps to keep everything in place. Now it does become a challenge when we get up to the top where the zipper pull is. So I'm going to get as close as I can up there. And see, now I have this metal zipper foot that kind of prevents me from sewing as close as I want if I just lay it flat. So I kind of have to push it over to make sure I still have seam allowance that I can sew on. So we're going to come up and now, but I can sew there, but see this won't fit under the zipper foot. So I'm going to go ahead and back tack because I went as far as I could. Now we're going to take it out of the machine, and I'll go ahead and cut this thread. Okay, now I'm going to remove the stitching. Hopefully that won't be too ugly. I might have to take a couple stitches out just so it doesn't look bad. There, we can trim that thread. There we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take out the basting stitches. So I'm going to grab a seam ripper. Here we go. And we're just going to be taking out those basting pieces like this, so that now we'll be able to see the zipper. And we kind of just wiggle gently and pull those threads out. But that's the reason I don't do a normal seam, because then it's really hard to get it back out. But since it was just basted together, we can take those stitches out. But now I can go ahead and move the zipper foot down so it's not in the way anymore. And now I can finish my way up that seam. So now we'll come back here and get our thread ready and make sure it's laying on the folded seam allowance, and then get my teeth even with the edge of the fabric there. Now I'm going to go right back in where I stopped previously, and lower my foot, lower my needle. Oh, I should have opened it a little bit more. I think it'll be okay. Okay, and we're going to go up to the top, and I think I need my tweezers to make sure I can pull enough fabric so that my needle catches that 1/4 inch seam allowance, because it kind of wants to unfold. There we go. We'll continue the way up. Get back down and finish that. There we go. Hopefully we caught everything. Now we'll trim away the, let's pull it to the inside. There we go. Kind of pull it snug. Pull that. Okay. And now we can finish taking out the basting stitches. If you kind of gently open that. There we go. And I'm just going to kind of work my way down this seam. And then when I get all of those taken out, then I'll come back to the camera. And now we can unzip the front of our pajamas. So there we go. So there's the zipper. And now we back tacked here to hold that in place. So I'm going to actually just trim off the bottom part of the zipper that I don't need. And we'll throw that away. And if you'd like to ensure that that will stay, let's see, what you can do is we'll grab some thread here and grab a needle. There we go. Let's see if I can thread a needle. You can use the needle and thread to go ahead and just make sure you're doing the zipper and not the pajamas, but you can anchor some thread around this end of the zipper just to hold those together. If you'd like to have a little bit of extra security on that zipper. But it is back tacked here with the actual seam that's holding the zipper in place. But if you just like a little extra security that zipper's not going to come apart, you can always anchor it with a little bit of hand stitching there. And trim that. And voila. So now the zipper is all done. The next step we're going to do is to put the front to the back at the shoulders. So here we go. And with right sides together. So I'm going to do the shoulder seams with the front and the back. that'll go here, so they'll be an eighth of an inch, or a quarter of an inch, I'm sorry, and I'll put my regular foot back on. Then once those are sewn, we're going to open it up and we're going to put the sleeves into the armhole. So that's going to be our next step. To get the sleeves ready to put in, I am going to baste around the shoulder edge of the sleeve. Oh, that went kind of deep. There we go. But this is just basting that will come out later. So we're just going to baste once around, and I kind of made a mess on that one, but it will be coming out again, so it's okay. There we go. And yeah, that first one kind of slipped out of my fingers. And the reason I'm doing this is, there we go. And since I kind of got wonky on this one, we'll use the wonky one for the example, just so you can see how it's done and that it will actually still work. So now what I'm going to do is, you never want to cut your basting right up to the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to hold the top piece of thread, and I'm going to slightly, well, maybe, if I can gather it, my basting stitches maybe should have been even a little bit bigger. There we go. Let's grab the top one from this edge. And we're just going to slightly gather that fabric just a little bit, with the gathers more up towards the top of the sleeve. There we go. We'll just give us some room. So we've got a few little gathers at the top. Now I'm going to start with the right sides of my sleeve to the right side of the PJs. And I'm going to start at the outside edge of the armhole on one side and the outside edge of the sleeve. And I'm going to pin it in place. And I'm going to do a couple pins. So we're going to do one here. And then I'm going to pin where that dart is on the front, and I'm going to pin through the dart down so it goes down towards the armhole, and pin that. Then I'm going to come to the other side of the sleeve and the other side of the armhole right here. And somehow that one kind of got rumpled and turned around. I think it was something in my machine kind of, there we go. So we can flatten that back out. The threads kind of got wrapped around there somehow. So there we go. So the other outside edge of the sleeve and the bottom edge of the other side of the armhole. And we'll pin 2 pins here. And I'm working from the outside to the shoulder. So these are like the underarm spots. And now I'm going to work my way fitting the sleeve into the armhole so that all my puckers are up at the top of the shoulder. So there's this side. And so see how I'm kind of flattening this out, even though I have basting in there that will create those puckers. I want all those gathers to be up at the top of the shoulder, not under the arm, because you don't want gathers in your armpit, you know what I mean? So then I might have to actually pull just a little bit more of that thread because it looked like it wouldn't quite fit, but there we go. And I'm kind of adjusting the gathers so they're right up at the top. I'm going to go ahead and open the seam allowance at the shoulder and pin that top edge of the sleeve, and I'm kind of making sure it all fits in there, and those few little gathers up right at the tip top, and then I'll pin that. So that's what it looks like with the sleeve pinned in. So now we're going to go ahead and sew, and I usually put the sleeve underneath because I want to make sure I don't have any wrinkles or pleats in the bodice of my garment. So we're going to start at one edge here, one side of the armhole, and we're taking 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. Adjusting my foot pedal. I sew in my stockings or socks, and so it tends to get kind of slippery under my foot. There we go. So now we're gonna go around the sleeve opening, and I'm just making sure that I don't have any pleats in the actual bodice part, you know, the front or back of my garment. And as I come up to the top of the shoulder, I'm opening that seam allowance. And also with those gathers underneath, the feed dogs kind of help distribute those gathers as it's feeding it through. So we'll go ahead and make sure that's all nice and flat. And my dart for the front of the bodice here is laid down towards the armpit. So we're going to come on down, move that pin, and come down around the edge, just with that 1/4 inch seam, and then back tack. All right, we'll pull it out of our machine here, and we'll flip this way, and I'll cut a bunch of these threads. All right, and here's what it looks like on the outside with the sleeve put in. So there we go. And as you can see, there's not a lot of pucker up here, but it was mostly in the seam allowance. But if there was any gathers, I would want them to be up here, because that's where we need a little bit more fullness so it can come out over the shoulder. So there's our sleeve all put in, and it fit nicely with our dart here sewn in place. And fortunately, I don't have any of those threads from my basting that show, so I don't need to worry about taking them out. But there is the sleeve put into the arm socket. So now I'm going to trim away all my threads, and I'll put the other sleeve in, and then come back to the camera. So now both of the sleeves are in the pajamas. So here's what they look like, front and back. So now becomes one of the most satisfying things to do. And it takes a while to get it pinned, and you'll see why here in a minute. But then when you do this part, it's kind of fun, because we're going to finish out everything but the collar with one seam. So what we do is we're going to, let's see if I can get the sleeve opened out here on both sides. So we're going to turn the cuff so that it's out, and we're going to have the right sides together, and we're going to pin from this wrist, we're going to pin to the underarm, then we're going to pin down the side, and then around the foot. There we go. And hopefully I did it so that it'll fit. Around the foot, then back up to the inseam to the crotch, then down the other inseam, around the other foot, back up the side to the underarm and to the other wrist. So we're going to pin all the wrists together and sew all that in one seam. Okay, I've kind of moved the camera back a little bit, so hopefully this will show up. But here is the pinned pajamas. So they're all pinned around the outside edges. So, oh, there we go. My needle wanted to grab a bit. So we're going to start at one wrist. And this is kind of satisfying because you're going to go all the way around the entire pajama. On the cuffs, I have the seam allowance toward the sleeve. And there we go. We're going to place Get in our machine, sink our needle. Gonna start with some back tack just to anchor that in. There we go. Okay. And since it's anchored, now we're going to get close and I'll take out that first pin. Okay. And now we start around the edge. And I think I'm going to use my magnetic plate here for my pins. Just because it's a little bit easier to catch them there. All I have to do is kind of lay them on it. Now when it comes to the underarm, I like the seam from the sleeve to go towards the sleeve. That's just my preference. You can open that or you can have it towards the bodice, whatever you prefer, but I usually like that seam allowance to go towards the sleeve. Then we're going to come down the side of the bodice here. Coming down along the hip. Now down the leg. Okay, then there we go. Just making sure everything is still nice and flat. And this is a little bit thicker because it has that non-stick grippy fabric inside. So it is a little bit thicker here. And then I am lifting my foot once in a while to make that rounded corner there. And thankfully the belt decided to warm up and it's not screaming at us anymore. Okay, now we're going up the inseam. There aren't many garments that you can finish and put together with just one continuous seam, so I always thought these were kind of fun. Fun to put together. Alright, I'm coming up to the crotch seam, and here I am going to back tack just a little just to reinforce that before I go down the other inseam. And I asked some people if they liked the music or liked it better without music, and although not a lot of people responded, a few that did said they did like less music sometimes, especially if I'm talking, because that way they could hear better. So I'm not putting in any background music in this video, and you can let me know if you missed it. If you'd rather have it there or if you like this better. I just don't want it to seem too boring. Okay, now we're coming up the other side. And this will kind of give you an idea of a rough amount of time that it will take to actually make them. Except for the few things that I did off camera, but I just find this part to be so satisfying. I wanted to share it. Alright, now we're on our last sleeve, and I'm just pulling these so it doesn't go off the back of my machine here. Okay. Coming down to the opposite sleeve and the wrist. And here I want to make sure that my cuff pieces are toward the sleeve and that they don't get bent. There we go. Make sure that's even. So I may go ahead and lift my foot just a smidge and sink my needle again to make sure it clears that. There we go. And then we'll back tack. All right. And we'll pull it out of the machine, trim this. And then on the wrists, I do usually trim just a little bit of an angle back so it's not real bulky right at the wrist opening. So when we turn it right side out, it will look a little bit nicer. I was going to catch those and didn't work very well to catch them. So now our pajamas are all sewn together. There they are, except for the collar, which will be next, of course. So we're going to unzip them. Make sure I'm in frame here. All right, so let's start with the sleeve. We'll grab the cuff. So there's one sleeve. Then we'll grab a foot. They just feel so soft and cozy. I'm thinking, I think I need some footy pajamas too. All right, so we're going to push that in a little bit and pull our fabric down around it so that we can flip this right side out. There we go. There's our little foot here. So we'll pull out the toe. And, oh, you know what I forgot? I was going to trim around the seam allowance, but we'll pull it out. I used to do that when I was doing the Evangeline size, more of an MSD. I mean, they're like a tall MSD size, just because their feet are so much smaller that it can really get bulky, but I think that'll be all right. So there's our little foot, one foot. All right, so let's do the other leg here. Get it turned out. And the last thing we'll do is the collar. And I was thinking, probably just for the benefit of showing how I do it, and when I was examining some of my ribbing that I have available, I don't want those raw edges on the edges of my collar. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of white knit fabric and put together the rectangle piece for the collar. That way I can show you how to do it as well. So there we go. Now we have one more sleeve that will turn inwards. There we go. Pull it to the outside. Okay. And if we zip them up, there we go. Footy pajamas. Let's see if we can lay them the length here. So here is our footy pajamas that just need the collar. So I'll go ahead and grab those pieces so that I'll get those ready, and then we'll come back and we'll put the collar on and finish out our pajamas. For the collar, I'm not going to switch out my thread just because what I'm doing stays on the inside. It may poke out a little in if it shows through like the stitching a little bit, but it's okay. So I'm just sewing the ends closed, and I'm just going to go back and forth over my seam and anchor that. There we go. And trim my thread. Then I'll sew the other end shut. So I'm folding it in half lengthways, and I'm just sewing the ends shut. And I hear my daughters have come home from work, so it may get loud in a minute. I don't know. Sometimes they see my recording sign, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they see it and just come in and cause commotion anyway. So we'll see. Alright, I'll sew this Pin it back down. Anchor. All right. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to turn this right side out, and I just fold this against the edge and then flip it out. Here we go. And fold this one and turn it out. So that creates the collar. Then I'm going to pin this edge just so that it stays together, and so my raw edges stay together. So I'm going to put a pin here in the center so I can line that center back with my PJs. And on the right side of my pajama, I'm going to pin. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. If you don't want any raw edges at all, it's a little bit more difficult, so let's go ahead and do that. Just so you can see how to do it. So we're only going to pin one edge of the collar to the garment. And we're going to see how it goes around like this. So we're going to make sure that this sewn seam goes right to the very edge of our pajama, and we're going to include the zipper. And this actually is a nice way to finish these out if you want to make sure that your zipper ends are inside the collar as well, just so it looks nicer on the finished product. So we're going to pin that. Then we're going to match this edge, and I'm going to go ahead and open up that shoulder seam and pin that. There we go. And we're doing the right side of the fabric right now. Okay, so then we're going to come over to this edge, make sure that that seam is right at the edge of our fabric, meaning the front fabric of our pajama. There we go. And it's kind of weird because we're pinning inside the collar. And hopefully I've still got that on in the camera lens there. Okay, and then match up this edge. And I'm going to open up that shoulder seam as well and pin that edge. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and sew that from this where we sewed the ends around the neckline to the other edge where we sewed the ends closed. So here we go. Let me get some of my mess out of the way here and lift our foot. Hopefully it'll stay up. Okay, so now with the PJ down, because I want to make sure I have all of my collar out of the way that I don't want to sew, I'm going to fit it in the machine with the pajama part flat, pulling the collar, the other edge that we're not sewing, out of the way, and lining it up so that my needle will come down on that seam that I sewed the collar on. There we go. So we're going to anchor that down, and now I can go ahead and remove a pin here. And I'm going to back tack back to that seam. Alright, now we're going to go around the neck edge, and I'm going to kind of just double check my shoulder seams as I get there to make sure they're still open. Remove a pin, keeping this fabric kind of pulled gently away from the needle because I don't want any pleats in my garment. And then we're going around. Now we're coming to the center back. There we go, making sure our raw edges are together. Okay, we're coming to the other shoulder seam. So I'm going to remove a pin, and oh, my poor machine desperately needs a servicing. Okay, I'm going to open up the seam allowance from this shoulder underneath there. There we go. Go ahead and lower my foot back down. Okay, now I'm coming to the other edge. And as I come around, I'm going to bring a little bit of this side kind of forward so that I have some wiggle room with this piece. Lift my foot up a little bit. There we go. Okay, because here I have the edge of my PJs, and I want to sew right to that seam where I had closed the collar. Take my pin out. There we go. I'm right on that seam. Now I'm going to back tack and take that out. Okay, trim away my threads. Alright, so now all of this seam, and this I'm going to trim a little bit of this side of the zipper so it's not too tall. And the same with this, so it's not too tall. Now all of that I just sewed is going to go up inside the collar. And then the collar edge is going to be folded like this, and it'll be folded up inside itself, and then that will all be hand tacked on the inside of the garment like this, so that it will be nice and finished on the inside as well as the outside. There we go, fit it all in there. And then that's what the outside looks like as well. So I will go ahead and do this handwork and finish the inside of the collar to tack all that down so it looks nice and pretty, and fit all my seam allowance inside with my hand in the way. Sorry about that. And I'll finish out that handwork, and then we'll go ahead and put this on the doll and see how our pajamas look. And here is the finished set of pajamas. So we'll spin her around to see the front and the back. So there we go. You can see how they fit. Then we'll kind of go up for a little bit more of a close-up here. So we have the zipper in the front, which is kind of, there we go. It doesn't lay too badly. And then the sleeves have the little cuff on them. There, we'll turn the light a little bit better. And then the little collar is finished. It was a little bit uneven, but not too bad. Part of that is the joy of putting in a zipper. So if you're better at zippers, I'm sure yours will look better. Then we come down to the feet, and if we spin her around, we can see the non-skid grip down there on the bottom, so she won't be slipping and sliding. So, and then the one thing I did forget is I was going to put elastic in the back at the waistline from side to side, just a little bit of elastic there to kind of pull it a little bit more. And then I was also going to put some elastic at the ankles, but it didn't really need it, so since I forgot it, I didn't put it in there. It still looks okay. But yeah, if you want to add that, you can. But there are our finished Footie pajamas, and I hope you had fun seeing how to sew them, and that way you can go ahead and give them a try yourself. Again, this is the Angel Studio Huarong, and so she does have a little bit fuller figure, and she is on her tiptoes. So without tiptoe heeled feet, she'd probably be about 58 centimeters tall, but as is, I think she was 60 or 61, I don't remember. But that's about how tall the pajamas will fit. And then you can kind of tell she's got a very, very full figure, because there's not a lot of wiggle room, but there's enough to where they're just cozy, comfy cozy. So it's a good fit, not too tight, but it would still work for a doll that's more slender. So thanks for coming along, and happy sewing to you as you do your projects, and I'll see you next time. Bye.